Thank you guys all for coming today. This is hopefully the first of many to follow in this vein. I know I wanted to sort of introduce this a little bit as to why we feel that it's important to create this sort of safety crib sheet. And there's not, I feel, enough safety tips on just on reporting on a daily basis. You know, just for lifestyle magazines as well. Everyone feels that lifestyle magazines are just, there are no safety hazards in that. But there are, because every time you go anywhere, you interact with the city, you interact with different types of people. You know, they might be celebrities, they might be really rich people, but all sorts of things can happen to you in confined spaces, and often also in public spaces. There have been times when we've had to go and shoot, you know, very high-profile clients who are some of the most elite or whatever in Mumbai. But they will go, because they have our mobile numbers, they'll call us at 3 a.m. and they'll be drunk and they'll be saying all sorts of stuff. You know, all sorts of things will happen. And it's okay that you're in your own home and you're safe in that sense. But these types of things will happen. And I think we need to start addressing them. We have to start talking about them to each other. Because that is the only way we'll try and figure out better practices for all of us at an individual level and also at an organizational level. So just to introduce this, over the past year almost, there's been a lot of shouting about how we've been led down by the police, by the government, a lot of things like that, and maybe we have. But I think it's time also for all of us to start looking inward and to start taking responsibility and taking time to actually think about how we can protect ourselves. And how we can create safer environments for ourselves. And I think I would like to start with why we have to consider why. I started out as a photographer almost 15 years ago, and I like to say that Mumbai was a different place. Sameera might think differently. I'm just saying at an interactional level. Okay? I feel I had the luxury to make mistakes. I don't think that people who are now, entering the profession will have that same sort of luxury. Every city is evolving as people are evolving as well, and we need to keep our eyes open as to what's going on. I would like to share some of what I feel is important to know about what's going on, what's relevant in India as a whole. In 2007, there was a government survey which revealed that 53% of all children in India are sexually abused. 53% of all children in India are sexually abused. The majority of those children were boys. Okay? 70% of all children have been physically assaulted. When violence is what people are exposed to as they are growing up, it's very difficult to understand that there's something wrong in perpetrating it. There are studies on this. I don't want to get into it, but I want people to understand the setting, because I think it's very important to consider this as a foundation whenever we step out for anything. In Delhi, in the last 4 years, crimes against women have increased by 25%. I'm not saying Delhi is worse. I'm just saying this is the statistics I have on hand. Again, 2007 studies showed that 98% of all children were 2 kilometers from a primary school. That's great. But the dropout rate by grade 8 is 57%. And 90% of Indian children do not complete their education. There's a direct correlation between education deficiency and an increase in crime, and a decrease in economic independence. Just remaining in school for 1 extra year can mean a 20% increase in your salary. So let's look at some statistics specifically related to girls. Only 1% of girls in India make it to the 12th grade. Okay? Last year, 47% of all unions in India were child marriages. You know, like what Sameera was talking about, that we don't talk about dowry anymore. We don't think that these things go on because they're not in our purview. They're not necessarily reported, and they're not things that we interact with. Doesn't mean that they are not going on. So this is why we have to open our eyes, and that's why when we talk about some of the safety tips, you'll understand what the context is. Over the coming decade, India is set to surpass 1.4 billion people. Already today, over half of our population is aged under 40. At this pace, in 15 years' time, there will be 423 million Indians of working age who will be unemployed. The majority will be uneducated, less healthy, ill-trained, highly marginalized, and excluded from mainstream society. And there will be a lot of frustration and there will be a lot of anger. You can see it already. No country can absorb the anger and misplaced expectation of 423 million people without a social upheaval. So why am I telling you all this? Because we need to be ready for this kind of social upheaval which is already taking place, and we need to be part of it. Which we can only be if we understand the scale of the social challenges that we are about to face. Before we start telling others what they should do, what the police should be doing, what the transport people should be doing, we need to start changing our own thinking. We need to start changing our own behavior towards ourselves and towards other people, I think. Because that will be the best way to create ripples of change around us. We hope today that just by talking to everyone in this room, all of you will take away something that you can take back to your organizations and say, listen, we need to talk about this more. We need to have some practices that we can institutionalize into our organizations. I hope that you will all talk to your friends and your families, and you will all together even sit down as a family and start thinking about crisis management or whatever it is. But we need to start thinking about safety at a micro level before we start shouting about it at a macro level. So that is really where I'm coming from for all of this. A lot of us are freelancers. You'll find that more and more in organizations, people cannot hire staff. Therefore, you will be a consultant, you will be a freelancer. Okay, why press passes were important to us in the past? Well, because it showed if you went anywhere, you could just say that I am part of the press. People would then therefore have an identity for you and let you go into wherever it is. If you are a consultant or a freelancer, the possibility is that you will not be able to have this press pass. Therefore, when you get a freelance assignment, you have to ask your employer for a letter. A lot of people will not do this because we just think it's fine. But it's not fine. Even your employer who should be giving you a letter will just be like, oh, they didn't ask for it, and oh, it's paperwork. Start doing your own work rigorously. If you start to lack rigor, then don't expect it from anyone else. Some media organizations that you will work for will not actually have press accreditation. Okay, a lot of lifestyle magazines do not actually have press accreditation. Therefore, they will not be able to issue you with a press card. But get some kind of letter, get something from them which says that you are working for them for whatever time period it is. Okay? If you start handing out your business cards willy-nilly to all and sundry, it becomes a huge problem for you. Because now all media organizations like you to have your mobile number on it. And that is a pain. This is why the people will call you at 3 a.m. You know, and they'll start giving you booty calls and all this kind of stuff, which you don't want to get into. So, you know, it's just a lot of things can happen. There are effects that you will not even be able to think of at that time. If you are traveling away from where you live, make contact with local journalists or an organization working in the area. Okay, if you can't afford a local guide, I mean, obviously it would be great to have a local guide. If you can't afford it though, that's when you have to talk to your local journalists. You have to talk to people who are there. Find someone who you can speak to, because you can then bring them into conversation when you get to the location. So people know that you have a base. If you are going down anywhere and you are alone, you're not with a writer or a photographer or whatever, you are alone, keep looking back, because people might be following you. Anyway, if you have a camera that is exposed, you will always have people who are following you. You know, and it's fine to have like a group of children. Children are often your best defense when they are following you. You know, they might be a nuisance because they like to keep getting into your picture, but in terms of safety, it's not a bad thing. If someone is now starting to approach you quite closely, you might just want to turn around and start shouting. You don't necessarily have to be shouting at the person. You can just like act like a crazy person. It's, you know, I know a lot of journalists who have done this, but they literally just start shouting and they start going mental and start, you know, and people get scared because you're drawing attention to yourself. And that's not what anyone who's trying to assault you wants. They don't want you to draw attention to yourself. Okay, don't have fixed patterns. This is quite a good one, especially if you're going to be in the same place for a long time and you're reporting on the same story, you have to go back. If people get to know your patterns, it's much easier for them to assault you or whatever it is. So just try finding different routes. Ask the person where you're staying to tell you different routes which are well lit. You don't want to start finding new routes which are even more dangerous than the one that you're already in. How you're traveling, that's also very important. A lot of times you'll think you have to get into shared cabs. If you are uncomfortable in getting into shared cab, don't get in. When you get to locations, sometimes people will come and try to be very helpful and they'll say, oh, but you know, if you want to do this story, then you have to meet such and such person and I'll lead you to them and you come with us. And then on the way, while you're walking with them, they'll pick up some of their friends and then you'll all start walking together. Don't walk in a crowd with them. If they are walking here and initially you were just with one person and you're walking like this, the minute there are more people who join, you start walking slower than everyone. Because you need to be able to get away if you start to feel uncomfortable.